Okay. All right, so with chapter one, it's just, we're really doing exposition here for the book. If you look, even at the very first page, you have this first sentence. When he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. And then the second paragraph, she says, when enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we sometimes discuss the events leading to his accident. I maintain that the Ewell started it all, but Jem, who was 4 years my senior, said it started long before that. He said it began the summer Dill came to us, when Dill first gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. So this is really just kind of keep this in the back of your mind throughout the whole book, that we're going to learn the story of how Jem breaks his elbow. And it takes the whole novel to get to it. Okay. So there's, kind of, if you've ever heard the idea of, just like kind of like the ripple effect, right? Like one action ripples out into new and different consequences. So this is going back. The story is actually going to start when he's 10. So he doesn't break his elbow till he's 13. So there's like a passage of about 3 years that takes place in the book. And then we'll finally, at the end of the book, learn how he breaks his elbow. So it seems like just kind of like a throwaway line at the beginning of the book, but keep it in the back of your head because it is going to be the thing that they're telling us the story of. So everything leads to it. When she tells us that enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we talked about this in our pre-reading presentation. This tells you that she's thinking back on memories, right? She's remembering things from her childhood. And so the whole book is told in flashback, basically, right? Telling us about things that happened in the past. But like your first question asks, like, what does that tell us about her status as a narrator? Is she going to be on the more reliable side or on the more unreliable side? Do you guys remember everything that happened to you when you were like 8 perfectly? That wasn't even that long ago for you guys. I definitely don't remember the things that happened to me when I was 8, like in crystal perfect memory, right? So your memories can kind of get twisted a little bit. Plus, when you're young and you're naive, you interpret certain events certain ways, right? So just kind of be aware that the events that we're seeing are through her eyes. So you just have to consider how reliable of a narrator she is in certain instances, right? The big things, of course, she's gonna get correct, like the first day of school. Yes, of course she went to school. But like her interpretations of the events, her descriptions of the events are gonna lead like a little more towards hyperbole, right? A little bit more towards like exaggeration. So just kind of keep it in mind that this is memories that she's looking back on. Okay. Okay. So if you look on like pages 4 and 5, we get this huge kind of, I don't know, backstory of her whole family. If you remember from our pre-reading presentation, we talked about the sort of social hierarchy in Maycomb. So her family is actually going to be like at the top of this because it talks about how her ancestors, kind of were some of the first people to settle in this area. So her family is going to be very well respected in the town. But if you can't tell already, she's kind of a tomboy, so she's going to kind of break some of the social conventions of the town. But her family overall is seen as like very respected, and there's certain members of her family who really kind of, I don't know, hold that over people. Not her and not her brother, but we'll meet some people later on. So just keep in mind about how they have really, she's in this kind of top part of the social hierarchy just because of who her family is, although she kind of herself goes against the social norms of their town. Okay, Then on page 6, we are introduced to the town itself, right? She says, Maycomb was an old town, but it was a tired old town when I first knew it. What kind of figurative language is she using there? Good. She's personifying Maycomb as a person, okay? Just sort of this tired, worn down town. So Maycomb definitely has a little bit of a role. I mean, it's the setting, but it also does kind of have this like character to it, okay? And then we get some more family history, okay? What happened to her mother? Scout and Jem's mother, what happened to her? Yes, so she had a heart attack, so she is dead. She is not in the story at all. But they do live with someone named Calpurnia. So sometimes people get a little bit confused about this. Who is Calpurnia? Yeah, so she's kind of like a cook or a nanny, or like, she just kind of runs the house for them. Um, she is a Black woman, but obviously this is the 1930s, so she was not a slave. She is just someone that they have hired to work in their house. Okay, so she is paid. It's not like don't get confused about the time period. And you'll come to see there's some tension between her and the kids, but she's an authority figure, so that kind of makes sense. But she's definitely part of the family. Sometimes people get confused and think that that's like a stepmom or something. Just to be clear, it's not. She's a hired employee of the family. Okay, and then in this chapter, we also meet another character named Dill, who's going to become pretty important throughout the book. What are some of Dill's character traits? What is Dill like? How could we describe him? Very curious, definitely. What else? He's small, right? They say that, I don't know, at the beginning, he's like Jem's talking about how he thinks that he's only 4.5, but he's actually going on 7, but he's like this tiny little kid. What else? Definitely. He's very talkative. Okay. Yeah, she says here, Dill was a curiosity. He wore blue linen shorts, a button to his shirt. His hair was snow white and stuck to his head like duck fluff. He was a year my senior, but I towered over him. As he told us the old tale, his blue eyes would lighten and darken. His laugh was sudden and happy, and he habitually pulled at a cowlick in the center of his forehead. So, he's just kind of this like charismatic kind of person, and they don't really have a lot to do, right? They talk about this like sleepy old town. So having a new person in town, that is living right next door to them, he's there living with his aunt for the summer. Okay, Miss Rachel is their next door neighbor, and he's living with her for the summer. So having a new person that they can play with is great, and he's gonna kind of be this kind of like curious, adventurous person who kind of propels them into, I don't know, digging into some things that they wouldn't have dug into otherwise. And the first thing that really fascinates him is the Radley house, right? So we're introduced to the Radleys in this chapter. Again, another family that's going to become very important. What is unusual about the Radleys? Okay, there's like rumors that that their son, they call him Boo, right? That he comes out in the nighttime. What else about their family is unusual? Good. Yeah. So they're very antisocial. And if you remember back to this slide that we talked about, how like the expectation was that everyone socializes, like on Sunday, you have your door open so that people can just drop by. Everybody goes to church. And if you don't do that, you're viewed as like suspicious and like there's something wrong with you. So whereas like maybe in today's society, maybe you have a neighbor that you don't see that often and you're just like, well, I don't know, they work a different schedule, you just brush it off, right? But in this society at this time, it would be like, okay, there's something wrong with them. What's going on with them? They're weird, they're different than us. So you can definitely see that stereotyping and like sort of the ostracizing of this family. I mean, they could just be shy and just not want to come out, but the town is going to start to create all these rumors about them because they don't fit in. So a lot of these rumors center around Boo, who is the younger son. And I say younger son, but he is an adult during the course of this novel. So it's not like he's a child like them. He is an adult. So they describe him as a malevolent phantom, right? Kind of like a ghost. People say he goes out at night. These are all these rumors about him, right? They say he went out at night when the moon was down. I'm on page 10 at the bottom of the page. And peeped in windows. When people's azaleas froze in a cold snap, it was because he had breathed on them. Any small stealthy crimes committed in Macomb were his work. When people's chickens and household pets were found mutilated, they, blamed him even though it wasn't him. They had rumors that, if you ate a pecan that fell from their trees, that it would kill you. All of these rumors, okay? So again, these are not true things. These are rumors. Again, she's a child, right? Think of like some of the, childlike superstitions that you have when you're young. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of suspicion around this family. And we do learn that when Boo was younger, he did get arrested for kind of just like, I don't know, just like some shenanigans, right? Like nothing too bad. They were just like riding around the car in a car in the town square and using profane language. But basically, once that happened, his dad, Boo's dad, basically shut him in the house and he wasn't seen. It says he wasn't seen again for 15 years. Okay. On page 13, it says there came a day barely within Jem's memory when Boo Radley was heard from and was seen by several people. And this is when Boo stabs his parents' leg with a pair of scissors. So I mean, there's definitely some truth of some kind of odd behavior, but definitely not what the town says, right? And that's kind of how rumors start, right? They're based on like a kernel of truth and then it expands into something else. Yeah, Marcella. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, this does kind of seem like, yeah, maybe he was seen, but it does say the doors of the Radley house were closed on weekdays as well as Sundays. And Mr. Radley's boy was not seen again for 15 years. So it kind of seems like they did. I mean, I'm sure that he did maybe go out occasionally, but like no one ever really saw him. So they probably like were like, okay, you're home, you're homeschooling, you're staying here, you're not going out because he had gotten into this trouble that really embarrassed his family. His family is definitely not like kind to him. That's for sure. So again, like he does do some sort of unusual things. He did stab his dad in the legs with a pair of scissors, but not all these other things that people are accusing him of. So, and then you see there at the bottom of page 13, Mrs. Radley ran screaming into the streets that Arthur, that's his real name, Arthur is Boo, was killing them all. But when the sheriff arrived, he found Boo still sitting in the living room cutting up the Tribune. He was 33 years old then. Okay, so he's like he's a grown adult. He's still living at home with his parents, but he's an adult. Because this happened when Jem was barely remembers it. So he's probably, I don't know, upper 30s to 40. Okay, but he does still live with his parents. Okay. So they say they don't really know like why Boo is kept out of sight. It says Jem figured that Mr. Radley kept him chained to the bed most of the time. Atticus said no, it wasn't that sort of thing, and there were other ways of making people into ghosts. So again, that's like more of on the rumor side, right? Like, was he probably chained to his bed? No, probably not. But you can just see there's this suspicion, there's this curiosity. Nobody knows what's going on with this house, okay? We learn that his father is like very, very, very religious, very strict in his religion, doesn't really like speak very much, but he does pass away, right? She's kind of, again, she's telling the story of the town, kind of setting us up, all this exposition. So Mr. Radley dies. On page 15 towards the bottom, it says, the neighborhood thought when Mr. Radley went under that Boo would come out, but it had another thing coming. Boo's elder brother returned from Pensacola and took Mr. Radley's place. The only difference between him and his father was their ages. So even though Boo's father has died, now his older brother is living there, we still aren't really seeing Boo. Okay, so they kind of tell, throughout the summer, they're telling these stories to Dill. And so he just, like somebody said, he's curious. So he's just like so fascinated by this because, Jem and Scout have been living next to this their whole lives. They probably aren't really, I don't know, they just think he's like weird and like, yeah, there's these rumors, but Dill's never heard about this. So he's like fascinated and like wants to know more. And Jem gives this description of Boo on page 16. He was about 6.5 feet tall, judging from his tracks. He dined on raw squirrels and any cats he could catch, and that's why his hands were blood-stained. If you ate an animal raw, you could never wash the blood off. There was a long, jagged scar that ran across his face. What teeth he had were yellow and rotten. His eyes popped, and he drooled most of the time. How accurate do you think that description is? Does that seem like what he probably looks like? No, probably not. Jem's never seen this man in his life, first of all. So how would Jem know? And these things about like, he's drooling all the time, yellow and rotten teeth. Like, there's no way for Jem to know that, first of all. And second of all, highly unlikely that that's actually what he looks like. Okay. So then at the end of the chapter, we have this dare, right? That Dill dares Jem to do what? Yeah, go touch the house, right? So it's like a very childlike thing, like, oh, I dare you to go run up there, right? And he's not going to do it at first, but then, Dill kind of calls him a coward, and so he decides that he's going to do it. So he runs up, hits the house, runs back, and then the last paragraph of the chapter on page 19, the old house was the same, droopy and sick, but as we stared down the street, we thought we saw an inside shutter move, flick, an almost tiny invisible movement, and the house was still. So, like if someone's like looking through their shutters and then drops them, you can kind of see like it drop. So what can we infer here? Why would a shutter drop like that? Someone was watching, right? So we don't know who, but there's someone inside the house that's kind of watching them. Okay. All right, so that's the end of chapter 1. Like I said, tons of exposition, introducing you to a ton of characters. Just try and keep them straight as best as you can. If you need to like jot them down on a paper or something, because we're going to meet a whole bunch more people in chapter 2. So any questions on chapter 1? Okay, so you can go ahead and start reading chapters 2 and 3. And like I mentioned, the chapters are quite a bit shorter than chapters in The Hobbit, so they do go much more quickly. You do have reading questions that go along with chapters 2 and 3. Let's Hopefully, yeah. Okay, Google's working a little faster now. They're both on the same document so that you don't have to submit two separate things. Make sure you're writing in complete sentences. Chapters 2 and 3 deal with the first day of school. Okay, bless you. Scout's gonna go to school for the first time. And then chapter 3, they go home for lunch. So whereas, here you stay and eat your lunch. At this time period, a lot of kids would live close enough to home and they would have, I don't know, a pretty lengthy lunch break. So they would just go home and eat lunch at home and then come back to school. So chapter 2 is the morning of her first day of school. Chapter 3 is she goes home and has lunch with Atticus and Calpurnia and Jem and another person, and then they come back to school. So 2 and 3 together is sort of the full first day of school. Okay. All right, if you have questions, just let me know. There's no advisory today, so we do have the full class period, so you should be able to get through these 2 chapters. It's just about 20 pages, so not too much.